Hey, welcome to Inspiration Station, where it's safe to exercise your soul, and together we get fit to create. I'm Karina, founder of Koi Compositions, and Inspiration Station is a resource for you to rely on anytime you're feeling drained, or if your creativity pool is depleted. This is for you to use whenever you need encouragement or a reminder to believe in you. This episode is about vulnerability because that's at the core of every creative endeavor. And I know it can be an uncomfortable thing to face, I know. But face it we must if we are going to actually build real and lasting connections with ourselves, our souls, and the creativity we're fostering with the people we love around us, and with the people who experience our art, instead of creating a facade of emotion. If we want them to feel something when they experience what we've created, then we have to show that we are willing to feel something with them. So what is vulnerability? The Webster Dictionary defines vulnerability as capable of being wounded or open to attack or damage. And I think that's great if you're like a warrior or something, if you're going into battle. I do like the words capable and open. I think those are very good descriptors of us as human beings, that we are capable of being open, which means we also have the capability to choose to not be open to others. So it's very much a choice. And sometimes creating is a battle, right? Sometimes you do have to fight for what you're making. But there's another definition by Brene Brown. She has spent the past 2 decades or more studying courage, vulnerability, shame, and empathy. Her definition is vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. That sounds way more human than being open to attack or damage. Uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. She has said, quote, "Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's our greatest measure of courage." Whenever we create, we never have control over the outcome once we share it with the world. We don't get to determine if it will be liked, loved, hated, accepted, rejected, or even seen or listened to. That's why creating requires courage. And Brene says that vulnerability is our greatest measure of courage. Being willing to put it out there anyways. It can be really hard. I know it can be really hard, but this is so important because, again, it's all about creating those connections. And you can't create a connection if you're not even willing to put it out there. She also says, quote, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity. It is the source of hope, empathy, accountability, and authenticity." Wow. As awful and scary as vulnerability sounded before, now it sounds amazing. I want all of those things. Love, belonging, joy, courage, creativity, hope, empathy, accountability, authenticity are everything that I think everyone wants in their life. And the birthplace of it is something so hard, but worth it. Now I know it's worth it. Also, the birthplace of creativity. You cannot have creativity without vulnerability. You can't. Because the act of creating is the act of bearing your soul. And it's a hard thing to bear when you're closing it off to everything. Innate to this idea of vulnerability being this birthplace of all of these wonderful things, it's also important to recognize that opposition breeds deeper understanding and appreciation of what we have. So when we experience the opposites of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, creativity, hope, accountability, and authenticity in our own lives, it can help us see what we're missing when we don't allow ourselves to be vulnerable, when we shut ourselves off to the world and try to just look perfect, be who other people want us to be, going against our authenticity, creating in a way that other people will like instead of truly speaking from our souls. It's not the same. There's not the same quality of connection. So when we feel we're not being true to ourselves when we're creating, recognize it. Recognize it and know that now the next time you choose to take courage in the face of fear of uncertainty and be vulnerable, that's a good choice for a reason. And it is something that you are consciously doing to be able to create better. And not just create better art, though I think that does happen when we are vulnerable, but to also create better connections and to create better understanding. Last quote by Brene. Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. Never weakness. I don't know about you, but I can definitely tell the difference between when I'm creating my truth and when I'm not. It feels different. Truth feels different. And it is not always comfortable. It is sometimes the most uncomfortable thing. And you think, why did I put myself in this situation? I'm choosing to do this? What is wrong? That is, so hard sometimes. But truth always feels better in the end. I think that comfortable art is not good art. I think that when we put our comfort in front of our art, it doesn't allow the art to truly fulfill its measure of creation. Art is made to make people feel. And a lot of times it's made to make people feel uncomfortable. So why do we need this as we manage for our creativity? Amanda Palmer said, "You can only connect the dots you collect." I love this quote. I think I need to explain it a little bit. She was talking specifically about how art is all about connecting the dots of our experiences, taking things that we have personally experienced and connecting them in a way to help other people experience them. But her point is that you cannot connect dots if you're not experiencing things. And we can't experience things unless we're willing to be vulnerable, because without vulnerability, we shut ourselves off to a myriad of emotions and opportunities for learning and growth. So you can only connect the dots you collect. Be willing to collect them and know that collecting them serves a purpose for you to become a better person and more of who you truly are, but also to help the people who are going to experience what you create. Vulnerability is the act of being open, opening up to pain and heartbreak and failure and weakness, or maybe opening yourself up to something that you don't know really well, being an anti-expert. The word I was actually looking for is amateur. Allowing yourself to be an amateur and not trying to have an expert complex. You don't need to be an expert at everything in order to experience it. When we open ourselves up to that, when we're vulnerable to those things, then we're collecting so much more that we can connect ourselves to, our art to, and we can connect our audience to them. Gail Lynn Goodwin said that vulnerability opens the door to deeper connection to one another. deeper connection is everything that art is about. We want to connect with each other. We want to connect to how we feel. Oh, it makes it so worth it. I want you to think about, for a moment, a creative act that was not done by you. Whether it was a concert or a song or a sculpture or a painting or a museum that you went to or a building that you saw or a garden that was planted, whatever it was, I want you to think about someone else's creative act that made you feel hope. Someone else's creative act that made you feel loved. That made you feel seen, like you belong right where you are. That your pain and sadness and worries and struggles are understood. Think about someone else's creativity or creative act that helped you feel more creative, helped you feel inspired to go and make something. All of those memories are precious because, for one, they help you know that it's possible to create those feelings in other people through what you can create. These other people and what they did helped you feel, helped you connect those dots. You can do that too for other people. That's an important thing to remember. They're also precious because it meant that you were vulnerable in those moments. You opened yourself to those feelings. You are capable of doing that when you create as well. So where do we begin? In this journey of vulnerability, how do we start making that the norm for us? It's really hard. It is. Our brains specifically try to protect us from feeling uncomfortable, and so it will often shy away from vulnerability as soon as it possibly can. But we can choose to override that. We can choose to step into the vulnerability instead of out of it. Every moment gives us that option. And this can be particularly hard, especially if we have a habit of closing ourselves off. But habits can be rewritten because you're the one who gets to decide what you do over and over and over again. So, one thing that really helps me to do this is permission. Giving yourself permission to be vulnerable. Saying that this is allowed. This is human. It's a human thing to be vulnerable. And as a human, you are allowed to show that and to be that. You are allowed to have human experiences. And that includes not good ones. It also includes really, really great ones. It's not just a one-way street. When we are vulnerable, we open ourselves to the entire spectrum of human experience. Not just the good, not just the bad. But when we close ourselves off from that, then we only ever experience mediocrity, this kind of lukewarm living experience. So we don't want to do that. We want to give ourselves permission to be open to all of it. And an exercise that helps me, and it might sound juvenile, but it works, I promise, is I write myself a permission slip, much like you would have received in elementary school in order to watch a movie or something. I get a sticky note and I write on it permission slip. I give myself permission to enter whatever thing you need help giving yourself permission to do. I give myself permission to be vulnerable. I give myself permission to feel sad as well as happy. I give myself permission to fail on this project that's super important to me. That might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes when I feel like I can't fail, I either procrastinate terribly on that project, or it's not as good as if I would have given myself room to try new things, which means being willing to mess up and maybe not succeed at all of those new things. I give myself permission to keep trying. I give myself permission to ask for help. Whatever it is that you need permission to do, give yourself a permission slip. And at the end, I always sign it, because you always needed a signature on a permission slip at school. I try to sign it in a way that helps me know that I am there for myself, that I can rely on myself. It's an act of self-compassion, really, to show that it's okay. Needing this permission doesn't mean that I'm flawed. It doesn't mean that I'm incapable or not talented or whatever else thing you feel like you should be all the time. It just means that you needed a little hand and you were able to give that to yourself. That is a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. So that's one way to start. There's lots of other things that you can do to include a practice of vulnerability in your creativity and in your life. And a lot of these other episodes are going to build upon this and help you incorporate it more. But those two things, I think, are wonderful exercises to get you started. Write yourself a permission slip. Give yourself opportunities to meditate upon and remember how you have felt. You can think about times that your art and creating your own art has helped you to feel those things as well. Brene Brown has a TED Talk about the power of vulnerability, and it's an amazing resource to learn more about this and about her research, which has significantly impacted me and my creative work and my life. And I want to share it with you. So in the description of this video, there will be a link to her TED Talk, and I hope you're able to go and watch it. This is a great resource for you to continue learning more about how this can benefit you and increase the power of your experiences, which in turn increases the power of what you create. I want you to know that I believe that every single person is capable of being open to vulnerability. Every single person has that functionality if you just choose to step into it. And I believe that when you make that choice, life becomes so much more vibrant. Again, it's a spectrum. It's the entire spectrum. Instead of just muted colors, muted emotions, muted experiences, it's vibrant joy, which also brings with it vibrant pain. But that pain can be used to create beautiful things. So can that joy. Vulnerability is hard, but it makes life so much more beautiful. And I hope you give it a try. I hope you do. You're not doing it alone. I'm doing it too. I'm not perfect at this. I try. And I am proud of myself for trying. And I'm proud of you for showing up and trying. And I hope you can be proud of yourself for that also. Because it's hard. And it's something that is worth your celebration and recognition that you are trying. And you can do this. All that's required is that we keep going, is that we take another step. Find a way for your next step in your creativity to be open to that vulnerability. Even though it's filled with uncertainty and risk and emotional exposure, keep trying. I will talk to you again soon. Until then, stay creative. Thank you so much to my patrons for their support, which enables me the freedom to make the content I want. And a special thanks to you for listening. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss any releases. And if you want to support me and my channel, you can become a patron at patreon.com/koicompositions.